welcome back to Daleks Aren't Robots. I am several thousand inches tall. My name is Josh. That fact's probably wrong.
I'm pretty sure it's wrong. You're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of, let's see, 72 inches.
Maybe. Anyway, that's Kari. And over here we have Zach.
Hello, I am not 70 times smaller than my normal height.
Yes. Sadly, Justin has shrunk and we've misplaced him, so he will be sitting out for this podcast. Hopefully, he'll be back within either the next episode or the one after. We'll see.
Unless one of his cats eats him.
One of us cats?
No, one of his cats. I'm not a cat, obviously.
But anyway, we don't talk about possible feline consumption. We talk about Doctor Who. Kari, you've never seen Doctor Who. Well, now you've seen Doctor Who, but before this podcast, you didn't watch Doctor Who.
That is correct.
Zach and I did watch Doctor Who, and now we're showing you Doctor Who. And today, we're kicking off the second season of William Hartnell's era with Planet of the Giants.
Ooh.
Kari, since Justin's not here, I'm afraid you will have to do the summary for this week.
Okay, I will do the best I can.
What happened in this 3-part serial?
A lot happened, but it started out the traditional way with the Tardis breaking. The doors pop open and everyone has to get together to force them shut. They land anyway and they start exploring and they find a bunch of gigantic dead bugs, including an ant the size of like a Doberman, would you say?
Thereabouts. So
Yeah, about the size of a Doberman. Eventually, they figure out the hook of the episode, which is that they're actually on Earth. They're just shrunk to the size of about an inch high.
Yes.
And of course, they proceed then to split up, and then they have to look for each other a couple of times. But there's also kind of a long-term side plot going in this set of episodes. There are some full-sized humans. Their names are Forrester, Pharaoh, and Smithers, I think. Forrester is a businessman. Pharaoh is a safety inspector. Smithers is a scientist. They're all working together on a new pesticide. Pharaoh, the business guy, finds that the pesticide works, but it works too well. It kills everything, including like bees and earthworms, which you kind of need. And it also persists in the environment afterwards, which makes it a really, really bad pesticide. And Forrester finds that he has been producing this pesticide already for a year, like for a full year of production. So he has a bunch of it stockpiled up and he'll lose his shirt like financially if it doesn't get sold. So he kills Pharaoh, the scientist guy, or the safety inspector guy.
Yeah.
And the Tardis team kind of sees that while they're teeny tiny. Smithers, this third guy, the scientist, finds out about the murder, but he doesn't realize that the pesticide is bad. So he agrees to help the other guy cover up the murder. This means that the Tardis group of tiny people can't just get the humans' attention and ask for help, because even if they could understand their teeny tiny little high-pitched voices, one of them is a murderer, and they probably don't want witnesses to that, no matter if they're an inch high or like 6 feet tall. So the tiny people also work out that the pesticide is bad, but Barb touches it before she realizes it's poisonous on this giant piece of grain that's like the size of 2 footballs or so, which is adorable, by the way. But she doesn't tell anybody, so she holds the idiot ball, unfortunately, for like a lot of this episode. That made me sad. So they try a couple different things. They try to call the police about the murder using a gigantic telephone, which is freaking adorable, but they can't be understood because they sound super high pitched or whatever. They set up an explosion to try to burn down the lab, which also doesn't work, but it does wound the murderer guy just in time for the police to come in, because he also tried to get away with pretending to be the guy he murdered on the phone, even though he sounds absolutely nothing like the guy that he murdered.
But he put a cloth over the receiver. That's how that works.
Right? I mean, right. And Smithers, by this point, has also worked out that the pesticide kills bees, so he's like, oh, well. So all of these forces come together to foil the murderer at the end.
Yep.
The teeny tiny team with their ticking clock of Barbara being sick from the pesticide like manages to finally get back to the TARDIS, and the Doctor manages to restore everything to its original size via like hand wavium or whatever. So this miraculously and stupidly cures Barbara. They say specifically that the reason that she couldn't fight it off was because like
Her cells were
her immune cells are so small that they can't deal with the pesticide.
Yeah, the pesticide
I mean,
is
it was like,
bigger.
no, that's not how
Yes,
that
but
works.
then she got bigger and the cells were able to fight it off.
Yeah,
Science.
see, that's not how. See, it would have made sense if the dose was then too small, because that would have actually made sense and been scientifically accurate.
Yes.
This way makes no freaking sense. So I mean, whatever, it's Doctor Who. I'm not going to fuss about it. But like, anyways, they're all regular sized again, and the TARDIS starts to materialize again. And that's where the episode ends. No doubt they'll end up somewhere equally horrible the next time, but
You forgot that the Doctor now has a deadly poison.
Oh yeah, he kept some of the poison grain and the formula for the grain, so that's great.
And then it ends.
Mm-hmm.
We need to say that we're gonna sell t-shirts.
That's right.
Yep. We're back with the original TARDIS team, so let's jump to them. Normally we would start with the Doctor, but because there's, I think, a little bit to talk about with the Doctor, let's start with the two characters who I think are probably the easiest to cover here, which are Ian and Susan, neither of whom are given that much to do.
No, but at least they don't hold the idiot ball.
No, they don't.
Ian does carry the idiot ball for a little bit early on. He sees a giant seed bag with like a whole bunch of text on it that includes the word Norfolk, and he can't figure out that he's tiny, even when they find like a gigantic sized matchbox.
Also, he chose a hiding place that moves.
He chose a hiding place that moved twice.
Yes.
First the matchbox and then the briefcase.
Which gets us some wonderful acting from I think William Russell plays Ian. Is that correct?
That poor actor. I think they just put him in a narrow space and he tried to like sway himself from one side to the other. And oh, honey.
He was Star Trekking it so hard.
Yeah.
Well, he actually had to be really careful because those poles were the size of telegraph poles. If he had moved the wrong way, he would have twisted in.
He would have fallen over and hurt himself.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
They weren't secure. The poles were not secure.
Yeah.
It's not his fault. It is what it is. When you have 60 cents and some lint for a special effects budget, that's like, you get that.
And Susan at this point is just like,
Susan
she's there.
Doesn't have like a big part in this, but she is plucky and smart.
Yeah.
She does freak out once or twice, but not to like an unreasonable extent. Like, I'm sorry, if I saw an ant the size of, probably a German Shepherd, I'd probably freak out too.
Probably a little smaller than that. It's still fairly big though.
Maybe a collie.
Yeah.
It's way larger than a freaking ant should be, let me tell you that.
Yes.
She catches on to the fact that they're tiny first. She climbs the drain spout with her grandpa.
Yep.
She gets a little bit upset when Ian gets picked up in the matchbox, but not to the point that it's like totally unreasonable. I mean, she is a teenager too. She's not, a complete adult. I don't know.
And she helps commit arson.
It didn't give her a lot of showcasing, but like it didn't destroy her character like the Aztecs did.
She's
either.
just there. So speaking of character assassination though, let's talk about what they did to Barbara, because god damn.
What they did to Barbara. What they did.
What did you do?
What did you do?
Louis Marks. What did you do?
She gets the worst treatment in this one by far and holds the idiot ball for a lot of it. And most of it, honestly, is just one thing. She picks up some of the poison grain to inspect it, which it's not the smartest thing you can do, but it's not that, it's not out of character. And it's not the stupidest thing you can do either. The problem is afterward, when she finds out that the grain is poisoned, she doesn't tell the others that she touched it.
She actively hides it. She asks about a cure, and several times they go, why would you need a cure? And she says nothing.
Right. And there's not really a clear character reason for not doing it. She doesn't seem that concerned about saving face.
It's not necessarily a character reason, but it is a British reason. It's the stiff upper lip thing. They were always still heading back to the TARDIS anyway, and her telling them wouldn't have sped things up.
It would have. Like, you can always move a little bit quicker. I don't know if you've worked in a restaurant. You know what it's like.
I'm not saying I'm defending it. I'm I'm just saying that is the reason. It's a reason people would have accepted in 1960s.
This is basically toxic Britishness.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Like toxic masculinity, except toxic British.
This is Britishness at its most stupid.
Yeah. She even
She
faints
faints
in
twice,
this episode. And to
but-
be
She
totally
does.
fair,
Both times after being poisoned.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm willing to accept that as the poison rather than like fragility or whatever.
Yeah. The strenuous activity one I'm more okay with than the fly, which strikes me as just like, yes, I'm sure the poison exacerbates it, but I am sure if you were to ask at the time, they would go, women, giant bug, she will faint.
I will say this is
Oh,
the
women giant bugs, she'll grab something
first
and try to
time
hit it
that
or run away or
Louis Marks wrote for the show, and he had no real understanding of the characters. This isn't a defense, but he wrote it without really knowing the characters, and no one really came in to correct his character. They did a lot of not rewrites, but changing things up during rehearsals, but still you were left with the fact that it was written by someone who had no knowledge of how the characters worked.
I mean, it's considering that it's actually pretty good, but that one thing is bad.
And how she had been written in the first season.
I will say Louis Marks does go on to write some pretty good episodes. Day of the Daleks, I know, is like, it's not a favorite, I think, but it's sizable. It works.
Yeah, but well, it's another 8 years before he writes for the show again, so.
And I don't think it's badly written, but the characterization is just off in that one respect.
Yeah. Before we get to guest stars, though, there's, of course, the Doctor, who's probably undergone the most substantial character growth in this episode.
Oh my God, he apologizes.
Right off the bat.
He apologizes sincerely and like in a very kind, mild tone of voice to Barbara without anybody making him do it. And granted, this is because he was super snippy at everyone when the Tardis was breaking, but like he genuinely means the apology. And later on, like when Ian gets separated from the rest of the group, he's not like, well, I just need to go back to the Tardis with Susan for a few minutes to do stuff. He like actually says that we have to go and find
And when Ian and Barbara get abducted in the briefcase.
Yep. He's super keen on going back to get him. And in fact, it comes from him.
He climbs up a drain pipe.
Yes, he does, which is risky, and he has trouble with it.
When the priority goes from going back to the TARDIS to stopping the murderer with the deadly pesticide, the Doctor doesn't gripe. He seems to go along with it.
And in fact, he rants a little bit, which is hilarious because we've been watching this show, right? And he says that he can't expect sympathy from a murderer. And it's like, really, Mr. Shoveler? Mr. covertly picking up a rock to kill a caveman. Like, we've been watching the show, man. I'm
sorry. Who was it that was going to throw them out of the TARDIS into space in that one episode?
Yeah, I just don't know.
Also, did anyone else see how much he lit up at the end when there's matches and flames and explosions involved?
Oh, he was super happy about the explosion. Super happy to blow things up. Like, now I understand why they had the Doctor blow up the department store in New Who in the first episode, and he looks so happy and cheerful about that, and I'm like, okay, now I get it. Yep.
He's
definitely a bomber, a mad bomber, and a shoveler. Also, he has a cape in this episode, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, we have now entered the cape era of
the coat was
show.
Great. The cape is also great. I'm happy.
The cape's great. I kind of prefer the coat, but that's just me.
He just needs the hat.
He needs the hat.
And capes are kind of nice because if you're cold and you're sitting down, you can take it off and use it as a blanket.
That's fair.
Also, Hartnell knows how to wear a cape.
Yes. He does the flourish thing a lot.
At this point, though, the main cast has pretty much got a hold of their characters. Aside from the unfortunate writing of Barbara in this episode, I think they're all pretty on point. So let's move on to...
Wait, we got to talk about the TARDIS.
All right.
They use a tiny model of the TARDIS in this one.
Yes.
And it's so funny because, like, the first shot with the TARDIS, you're like, wow, that's a terrible miniature. It just looks like a stupid miniature. And then it turns out that they've been shrunk to an inch high, and you're like, oh. And I don't even think that that's probably a meta joke. That's probably just the tiny TARDIS that they had.
Yeah, probably.
But it was still really funny.
If they did need it for a miniature, that's probably the TARDIS they use.
Exactly. But I mean, that was a case in which it definitely worked.
Yes.
I think they had a better TARDIS for Marinus, so I think they may have made this one a little more obviously tiny, just specifically for that reveal.
That makes sense, because it does look different. It's not as detailed as the previous one.
No.
So let's talk about our guest stars. We only have 2 really and 3 kind of tertiary characters.
4.
Oh, well.
I think you mean maybe 4.
Are we referring to...
Don't forget the cat.
Yes, there is a cat.
Overall, I think there's 5 characters.
There's the murderer, the murderee, the
6.
scientist, the cat. There's also, like, in a peripheral thing, there's like an operator and a police person elsewhere, but we don't really care about them.
Well,
The operator's got some nice spunk. I do like that about her, but that's about it.
It was nice.
The murder victim, we don't know that much about, except that he is a bureaucrat with morals.
Yes.
Insert
and
joke
not
here.
very many brains,
No.
because like he seems to not recognize that Forrester is a real bad person.
Yeah.
His name is Pharaoh, the bureaucrat. He won't budge. The guy tries to get him to change his mind, but he won't do it. He says he'll turn in the report with the truth in it the next day. So Forrester shoots him.
Yep.
That's about it. That's all he's got.
Yep, that's about all he's got. Forrester is the murderer. He's pretty threatening, but he's also not very smart.
No.
Fortunately.
Oh god,
he
phone.
assumes that he can pretend to be his victim on the phone, and he's not even trying. Man. I was embarrassed on his behalf.
You can tell my name is Pharaoh now.
Yeah, exactly. He puts a handkerchief over the phone like that's gonna even do anything.
I'm reminded of an episode of the Adam West Batman TV show where they have a bit where Bruce Wayne has to talk to Batman on the phone, and it would just be like he faces this way to be Batman, this way for Bruce Wayne, and the voice doesn't change at all.
Yeah, I mean, you can make fun of the Christian Bale voice all you want, and it is hilarious, but at the same time, not even trying to change your voice is like
a little sus.
A little bit, yeah.
And the thing is that like he's so convinced it worked.
I know,
positive.
And it's like, oh my god, dude, really? Okay.
It's like a baby playing peekaboo. He doesn't get it.
No, it's terrible. But at least, I mean, whatever. The guy is stupid enough to go all in on this pesticide for a year of production without knowing if it's any good. And it's like, well, yeah, you're not the brightest bulb in the world, I guess.
No.
And then there's Smithers.
Smithers,
the scientist, who is absolutely desperate to get the new pesticide out, but specifically because it will enable them to feed more people.
Yes, he wants to specifically kill like locusts in Africa, I think he says, or something like that.
I can't remember where, but it's specifically for feeding the world.
Yeah.
Like his big goal is to Norman Borlaug the shit out of everything and just feed everyone.
Yeah.
Because the pests are going to be dead. He's not a bad person, which I didn't quite grok onto immediately. I thought he knew that the pesticide was bad at first, but like he actually didn't.
Well, the actor plays him very like stoically and sort of almost detached.
Yeah, he's super detached, and like so he's willing to help cover up the murder, which he knows happened, because he thinks it'll let him feed the world by using this pesticide. So he's kind of going along with the murder cover up, but for good reasons. And then in the end, he figures out that the pesticide is bad and tries to stop the murderer.
I will say he jumps to helping cover up the murder really quick. Like he doesn't even really ask why exactly is Pharaoh trying to shut down the pesticide. Or was.
Right. But it's a matter of lives. Starvation really was, that was a thing.
No,
so
I get it. I just, as a scientist, I would appreciate more curiosity.
Yeah, probably.
He's somehow a scientist who's been working on this and doesn't know all the side effects of it yet.
Yeah,
so...
no.
Yeah. I mean, I think that they've obviously gotten to the point where they've been testing it extensively, but they seem to be testing it only on things that they actually want to kill.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think they would have tested like other stuff.
So a lot of the plot and the way that the pesticide is treated and a lot of the arguments and what it does is taken from the writer Mark had recently read a book called The Silent Spring.
He did read Silent Spring. I knew it. Did I not specifically say Silent Spring? Rachel Carson, you win. Except not really, because the science in this thing over that is bullshit. This is not how any of this works, you guys.
No.
I just
No.
ignored it because it's freaking Doctor Who, so whatever.
Yeah.
But like, no,
Yeah,
the science
no,
is
like-
total bullshit here.
No, the science is total bullshit, but elements of Science Spring informed pretty much the whole plot. I mean, DN6 is not far off from DDT.
No.
So yeah, there's a lot of subtle and not so subtle references and points that she makes are kind of turned into plot points throughout the episode.
Yes, they are. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. See, all of that time reading about industrial pollutants was not wasted.
No, it helps you with the 1960s TV show.
Yeah, exactly. My life is worthwhile. Oh God. Sorry, I feel very vindicated right now. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, but they understand that the poison bioaccumulates, but it thinks that means it's everlasting, and that's not exactly how that works. And you certainly don't do that by like adding a chemical to it. The point is, yeah, I kind of figured that was it.
And it came out in 62 and this aired in 65, so it was a new book at the time.
Right. Wow. Well, that's super topical then.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
also, because of how small the pesticide is, obviously it can't hurt humans because of our giant white blood cells.
And that's also not how that works.
Well, even before they realize they do talk about how pesticides could affect humans, and they do say that.
Well, the problem with DDT actually is that it bioaccumulates up the food chain.
Yeah.
Like mercury does that as well, which is why the fish that you're not supposed to eat too much of are all fish that eat other fish.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
further you go up that food chain, the more mercury is in whatever it is you're eating.
Yeah.
So if you stick with the fish that eat, I don't know, whatever plants fish eat, then it has less mercury in it. That's kind of the idea with the bioaccumulation, which they don't quite get in this show at all, but at least they understood the main point of it.
I mean, yes, they're pulling from a real scientific event that happened, but this is still a writer of a British...
And it's for a kids show, so
yeah.
I mean, maybe they're just taking shortcuts too. That's very possible. But I mean, they got the idea of it mainly, so
yeah.
But yeah, it's basically DDT, and they prevent the production of DDT.
I am both kind of bemused by it and also a little put off by just how separate the two plot lines are in this episode. Like, it's really interesting how there's this murder mystery, well, not mystery, murder thriller going on the human level, and then there's a little Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style adventure going on in the house.
That's what I love about it, though.
And they never relate. Like, literally, if the Tardis crew hadn't shown up, they would still have gotten arrested. The Tardis crew did nothing.
I mean, them calling and being mistaken for a prank call is kind of what got the guy in trouble.
Well, yeah, kinda.
Well, and the thing that might have happened, though, was that Smithers probably would have gotten shot to death.
Yes.
Because he was about to shoot that guy when the phone thing happened. So
yes.
He probably would have died. That would have been the measurable difference.
So instead, Smithers lives on to go work at a nuclear power plant in Springfield, USA, under Mr. Burns. There was a character named Smithers. I had to get my my Simpsons reference in there somewhere.
True. The one thing that we didn't mention with them, though, is that they act like they're a couple. Smithers and Forrester do, and a lot of it, I think, is just blocking.
Yeah, I think they were going for like a devil on his shoulder type of thing.
But they just end up with, you're definitely in his personal space.
Yeah.
And he's not irritated by this, and it seems normal for them.
Yeah.
So clearly they're together, and Forrester is the worst boyfriend.
To be fair, Doctor Who is basically fueled by evil ex-boyfriends just fucking around with people.
Yeah, big time. He's a terrible one. This one's a terrible one because he's kind of vaguely threatening. He's not like, thank you for helping me with this murder. He's like, you better help me with this murder.
Yeah, he's got one of those faces. I feel bad for the actor because the guy just has a bad case of evil face. He just looks
But that
evil.
makes him perfect for a
I know,
kid's
it makes
show.
him perfect.
He played a lot of villains.
You don't say.
I love that the story goes back and forth between the two mostly unrelated things. Like, I think that that's really cool because they managed to weave the big people into the small people. And the small people, they gave a really good reason to hide from the big people because one of them's a freaking murderer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, so that helps, the entire episode work. And I kind of like that they basically fail to impact the big world most of the time.
Yeah, it's both kind of funnier that way and more interesting.
Right. And it adds a lot of tension, I think, to the episode that wouldn't have been there otherwise. I mean, it's
Yeah.
always cool to show the we've been shrunk set and do the special effects and stuff, but
I do kind of wish we'd maybe worked that tension in a little earlier in the serial. The first couple parts of this I find are a little draggy.
I don't feel that way. I felt like the tension was pretty consistently being ratcheted up. And then they add the ticking clock of Barbara being poisoned.
That is true.
But even before that, there's murderers running around.
That is true.
And they're murderers that if they're caught, there is nothing that they can do. I mean, they're totally helpless against the cat, let alone humans.
I was about to say, you keep talking about murderers, and I'm like, we didn't even mention the four-legged killer that's wandering around.
The cat doesn't actually do anything to him.
Not really.
When the cat showed up, I thought that was going to be like the main antagonist or like a major plot point, because that's how most shows would probably deal with this.
Okay, so we've talked about all of the major players in the story. Normally here's where we talk about setting, but in this particular case, setting is traditionally pretty mundane. Aside from production stuff, it's our world, but they're small.
And that's pretty great. I actually love the effects for the most part. It's kind of adorable to have miniatures of things, and now we have giants of things, and that's kind of adorable
we do.
too. Things blown up to giant size are cool. Like, I love the giant statues of things that we have. Like, there's a giant cow in North Dakota and a giant buffalo and a giant mosquito and a giant sandhill crane. So like, just random giant statues of things are rad.
I'm reminded of, like, as a kid, there were a lot of playgrounds and interactive museums that would have like these sections that are like, here's what an ant's life is like, and you climb into this giant anthill and look around at stuff.
Yep, or like the inside parts of a giant flower.
Yeah, there's one where I'm pretty sure you climb into a heart and look at all of the heart stuff in there.
And it's pretty good. Sometimes they use rear projection, which doesn't work quite as well. Sometimes not. The bugs basically look like the bugs are supposed to look like. I love the giant sink set. Like, that was probably my favorite one. That was kind of adorable.
That was cool. Zach, you actually gave me a note earlier about how the rear projections were done.
Yes. So for those, they use glass shots and front projection.
Glass shots?
They were a shot that they took at a separate point and then projected through glass to force perspective.
Oh, okay.
One of the things to note, remember in the last series, we talked about how they shot everything live and just moved from camera to camera?
Right.
They're still doing that with this serial.
Oh,
so this was all shot. So at points, they had to put cameras up on the tower to force the perspective, but this was still shot live because that's what they could afford.
That's cool.
I also then have to assume that they're basically running from set to set.
Yeah, like when they're supposed to be at the top of the sink and they're at the bottom of the sink, they're actually right next to each other.
That's pretty great.
Because again, the editing is still all in camera. They don't actually have editors yet.
Right. I love the giant piece of grain too. That was kind of an adorable prop that they use a couple times.
Yep, that was a jab light, carved polystyrene.
Oh, so what do you do for a living? Oh, I carve giant pieces of wheat out of styrofoam. Okay.
One of the things, though, that you did tell me, the giant fly was apparently not made by the production staff. They just found it in like a BBC warehouse.
The giant fly was made for another production and they just tied wire to it to make it move.
Yeah.
I wonder how that went down. Like, you're walking through the warehouse and it's like, oh, that's a giant fly.
That's precisely what we need.
Use that.
Raymond Cusick, he's the one who did the set for here. You would recognize his work. He did the set designs for the Daleks and for the Sinserites and for
didn't he do
Marinus, all the sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
So he's pretty thoughtful.
This is the first time that
he did an Earthbound story.
Yeah, but again, it took a lot of work. Most of the props were like the drains and stuff were plywood and hardwood, and then just painted metal or made to look like what they were supposed to.
They were very thoughtfully designed too, I thought.
I'm kind of both delighted and a little disappointed to learn it's Raymond Cusack working on this, because on the one hand, he does great work and he did great work here. On the other hand, because the sets here are so mundane compared to his usual stuff, there's no like gimp suit with a dildo strapped to the top of it or
But the mundanity is what makes it cool.
yeah.
Like seeing the quirks and recognizing that they're quirks before they say that's what they are. The giantness of the telephone and how difficult it is to deal with it.
Yeah, and having gone through how they worked everything out, and I'm not going to get into all that, but it's fascinating how they did that on a very lesser budget. Also considering that, I don't have the name, but another show much more well known for miniaturization came out like a couple years later with a much bigger budget. I can't think of the name right now. I should have had that written down.
Interesting. I mean, and I've seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Honey, I Shrunk the Audience and all the other stuff. I've seen plenty of this before, but it's nice to see it being done by people who have absolutely no budget. So they're just like being as creative as they possibly can be. I think their limitations really inspired them a lot of times to try things that would work.
Also, something interesting, the set that they were working with, the house that they built on the set was only one story, but they wanted to be two. So in that case, they did make a glass portrait and force perspective it to make it look like a two-story house.
Clever.
And it works really well. You can't tell in the one shot they show it.
No.
Oh, so I think that's all for setting. So let's move into production, and we've actually got a fair bit. I think we should start with the big thing.
The cat?
No, we'll get to the cat in a little bit because this is related. Zach, you told me that originally this was a 4-parter.
Yes, this was a 4-parter, and in fact, they filmed all 4 episodes. And then...
So, if I may, before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about the creators of Doctor Who. We've talked about Verity Lambert, and I'm pretty sure we've mentioned Sydney Newman, who are probably the 2 main people that people think of when they think of big creators on Doctor Who, people who really shaped where the show was heading and what it became.
But there were 2 other people involved in the initial pitch.
Yes. One of the people was C.E. Weber, who I believe he became part of the writing team going forward.
Yes.
And then there was the Ringo of the group. The kid in the class who did the least amount of work but got equal credit, Donald Wilson.
That's really mean to Ringo. I mean, he wasn't that great of a drummer when he started out, but he practiced for years and he got good.
Hey, Donald Wilson did rise up the BBC
is a
ranks.
great song, okay? Don't Pass Me By is a great song. I Will Fight You.
Don't Pass Me By, that's a pretty good song. Also, in his solo career, I do like Photograph, even though that's mostly a George Harrison song. But Donald Wilson is like, there's all the kids who do the research and build the dioramas and stuff, and then they just hand the sheet of paper to Donald Wilson and he reads the presentation. And that's it.
And then Don Wilson rises up the BBC. He fails upward as a white guy in the BBC.
Donald Wilson, basically, the thing that he did to get his name on there was he helped write the original series Bible, which by this point in the show had mostly been thrown out the window. Like, that's still in its educational show days. But he came back to give an order on this serial that I do think helped it out.
What was it?
I mean, I can read the whole... I have the order right here.
Yeah.
Read it.
Okay. As spoken yesterday, I am arranging to reduce the 4-part serial entitled The Planet of Giants to 3 parts. This is the minuscule story with which we must begin our new season, and I am not satisfied that it will get us off to the great start that we must have if it runs to its full length. Much of it is fascinating and exciting, but by its nature and the resources needed, we could not do everything we wanted to do to make it wholly satisfactory. I would, of course, have preferred to start with the Daleks serial, but at the end of this one, Carolyn Ford is written out and we cannot, therefore, have her appearing afterwards in The Planet of Giants.
So basically, the next serial we cover when we come back will be The Return of the Daleks. It's a great big deal that Donald Wilson wants to get to. This serial he thinks is fun, but won't engage people in the way he wants. So he wants to shorten it get it out of the way as quickly as possible so we can move on to the Daleks.
He made the right call. I think this
Yes.
episode is perfectly paced. I like that it's not super fast, but I don't want it to slow down anymore. The way it is now, the tension just keeps ramping up, and then they add a timer, and then it keeps ramping up again after that.
There is one thing that got cut, though, that I do miss, and I can see Zach like in the corner just frothing at the mouth to get to it. So let's
Well, a couple things. I sat through the reconstruction of all of it.
And who helped produce that reconstruction, Zach?
Ian Levine.
Yes, the patron saint of entitled whiny fanboys, Ian Levine.
It's a bad Ian.
Yes, he's a
Yeah,
very bad
he
Ian.
is. And he's who we have to thank for a lot of the recovery of the episodes.
I think we should say some allegedlys in here.
Well, we have to thank him for the recovery of the episodes,
Yes.
even though he is basically sitting on the recordings that he has and holding them hostage.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, as part of a weird, sick game to play publicity with
An
the BBC.
alleged weird sick game to play
Yes.
publicity.
Yes. We'll run that by the legal team, see if we can put that in the cast. Ian Levine is among the people who was leading the charge against Jodie Whittaker taking over as the Doctor. He has complained about pretty much every change the show has made since it came back.
And a lot of people blame him for contributing to the show dying in the 80s. Yep.
To be fair, unless his last name is the BBC, I don't think that was him.
He didn't help. The thing that he is most known for now is basically just making entitled whiny tweets.
Allegedly.
No, that one's not alleged. You can look them up.
Fair enough.
Ian Levine is basically everything I hate in a Whovian.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But he did bring back Carol Ann Ford and William Russell, the still living cast, to re-record some dialogue, and he got some new animations, and he edited together to make the 4 parts. Zach, how would you describe the 4-parter as it was intended?
I mean, 1, you don't get the direction, and 2, we reuse a lot of shots. You know that one really big shot of the bad guy's face? I have seen more of his face for longer than anyone needs to.
Well, I mean, you're doing a reconstruction, he doesn't have that much. But what's the pacing like? Does it fix any of the plot holes?
Oh, it fixes a lot of the plot holes, but then it adds a lot more padding. They have to escape from a smoke cloud because Pharaoh smokes.
I saw the CGI cat monstrosity.
Yeah, so remember how you brought up that the cat might be important? The cat dies in episode 3.
No!
And that is how... Yeah.
Okay, well, thank God for the edit then.
Well,
Ringo did the thing. God bless Ringo.
I mean, the thing is, these episodes were filmed and completed, so they had to choose cuts where they could. So the cat dying was actually...
That makes sense, because then it makes it clear that it's bioaccumulating.
Yep, the scientist sees the dead cat, and that's what causes him to realize how bad DN6 is.
So on the one hand, the editors saved the cat.
Yes.
What was also cut is, you remember those 2 characters that you said didn't really contribute at all? And
they do.
Yes.
I just don't care about them, was what I said. I don't care about them.
You care about Hilda and Bert a lot more when you spend about 10 or 15 minutes with them.
That sounds like a drag, man.
It is a drag, but they're kind of adorable. It is, as I saw one review put it, it's kind of like CSI Provincial Britain.
Then they should get their own spin-off.
Yeah. The one big thing that for me is unforgivable that they cut, despite how bad Barbara is treated in the writing, she gets one big moment with a nice speech and a little bit of characterization and authority, and it got cut out of the serial.
That's too bad. What's the context for it?
You know, at the bit, they're saying they're going back to the Tardis, and then all of a sudden, instead, they're trying to blow up the can. Right in the middle of that is Barbara's speech about how it's more important to try and stop the production of this than to save her.
That makes sense.
So she's the motivation that keeps them around to blow up the can.
Yeah.
There was one other similar speech that also got cut that, frankly, I'm a little more happy got cut.
Hartnell got a speech about how he can't let the planet be destroyed.
That sounds good, though.
It's good. It's just, in my opinion, it rushes Hartnell's character arc a little bit, because this whole changing from an anti-hero constantly running from the threats to someone who's going to be a more active combatant against them really hits its nadir in the next serial, where it's a big epic serial. It deserves that moment. It feels more authentic for that to be Hartnell's moment as opposed to this one.
You don't mean nadir, you mean it's apex.
It's apex.
Nadir
I know
is
words.
the other direction.
It reaches its apex.
Right.
The top. The good thing.
Well, and that makes sense because honestly, in this one, for the most part, I think he just really wants to blow something up.
Yeah.
Like, and I understand that. I kind of want to blow things up too. Like, if I had the opportunity to do that, I totally would. But I think that works. I think the cuts were a good thing, though. Like, it definitely doesn't need padding.
Well, my issue with the cuts is that they had filmed it already, so they left a lot of plot holes, and the constant fading to black makes it obvious where those cuts are.
I didn't notice it while I was watching it, though.
Yeah, I think unless you know they're there, it's not that obvious.
And I never want to see him kill a cat. I mean, I watched Uninvited and I didn't want him to kill the cat, and that cat was a murderer.
If you see the CGI cat monstrosity, you might.
Have you seen Uninvited?
No.
It's a monster movie where the cat is the monster.
Oh, yes, I have heard of that.
It's pretty bad.
Here's a question for you. Would you be okay with watching a cat die if it's one of the Jellicle cats from the Cats musical movie?
Is it the horribly, horribly naked Idris Elba?
Yes.
I'm still terribly scarred by that. That movie made me not want to see naked Idris Elba. I didn't know that was even possible.
I know.
No, okay, yeah, all right, we can kill that cat, but like, yeah, I don't want to kill the kitties. Like, I'm glad that they didn't show that. That would have been...
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessary. I think we can still...
We figured it out.
Yeah.
I think the tightness makes it better.
I agree. I already was starting to feel my butt chafe in a couple of scenes that I felt lasted too long, so...
And I didn't, but like, I think the pacing is like perfect. So adding stuff to it is a bad move.
I may just be impatient.
You gotta remember, this is made in the 60s. Pacing was not like it is today.
I know, but at the same time, like, I can sit through the Aztecs and I don't worry about the pacing at all. And
How do you feel about Jaws?
I love Jaws. Jaws is a great movie.
But it's also slow as shit.
It is fairly slow. I feel like a big part of the problem is that there's a lot of times where it's not just slow, but it's also kind of aimless. There's a lot of Barbara and Ian kind of just wandering around and looking at stuff.
And they also cut a lot of, like, at points there was more science talking about the sound waves and stuff and all that. They were trying to still fulfill the remit of being educational.
Well, even just having a close DDT analog that is genuinely bad, if not quite exactly scientifically how it was actually bad.
Yeah.
I mean, at a kid level, saying it's eternal is not incorrect. It's just a vast oversimplification.
Yeah.
Now kids know how white blood cells work.
Yeah, that was kind of, there's that. And it taught them to think about pesticides and what they actually do. So that's more than some people do their whole lives.
Also, now kids know how to make a bomb. The important things. I think we're going to move on to Dalek scores. As always, of course, opinions are not loose things that can change with time or shift from person to person. They are objective numerical scores that we range on a scale of 1 to 4 Daleks. So,
and we're just correct. So if you disagree, you're wrong.
Yeah, clearly. So, Kari, let's start with you.
4, all of them. I like this one a lot.
Wow.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. I like murder thrillers. And so mixing that with an actual Honey, I Shrunk the Kids thing, but having them connect in a way that actually makes it sensible that they don't just call for help. Like, that's something that's missing in a lot of thrillers. You should just call the frickin' police. And here there's a good reason that they don't do that. They can't ask for help. Like, I think the pacing was really good. I'm a little more patient, I guess. I felt like the tension kept ratcheting up over and over again, and like they added a ticking clock to it. Apart from Barbara's character assassination, that was the only bad thing. And like, it's not so out of character that it was absurd. I just didn't like it. So yeah, $4. Right. I liked it a lot.
I give it 2.5 Daleks. I think it's fine. I think it's on the higher end of average, but I don't like what they did to Barbara. I find a lot of the padding fairly annoying. There's a lot of it I just find myself kind of bored.
You won't even give him an extra half a Dalek for the social message?
I would, but then
This was the year after Silent Spring came out, Josh.
I give them a half a Dalek for the social message, but then I detract a half a Dalek because of the attempt at kitty murder.
Ugh, they didn't actually kill the cat, though.
No.
Thank God.
No.
Were there 2 different cats used in this?
Nope, there was just one cat. Noakes was the cat's name. Well, Sammy in the episode, but the name got cut. But the cat was called Noakes.
The lighting must have been super different in those 2 shots then.
Well,
because
it was different, and the cat was recorded at 2 different times, weeks apart.
All right, sure. Because at one point it looked like a pure black cat, and then at another point it looked like a, what are they called? Tortoise shell.
Yeah, that was the lighting.
Okay.
Something else I do kind of want to touch on. Verity Lambert actually had desperately wanted to do a minuscule episode. She had initially intended for it to be the pilot, and they didn't have space to work. So she used this as a way to basically lobby the BBC to finally get the bigger studio.
Just briefly, that story was going to be in the Coal Hill School.
Yeah.
They would have had to interact with their students or Susan's classmates to try and get back to the TARDIS, and they would have communicated through like a microscope. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like they wouldn't go anywhere. They just got smaller. And then in trying to go somewhere, they'd end up on the Dalek planet. Instead, we got cavemen and fire. You know what? I will change my score. I'll upgrade it to 3 Daleks. Mostly just for Verity Lambert.
She's the queen.
I like how much she fought for the show. She did a lot to get this show to where she wanted it to be.
So I guess that brings it out to me.
Yes.
And as usual, I have a completely different experience because I dig way too much through the production. From a technical standpoint, from what they built and how they did it, it's definitely impressive. And the shots and all that. The story, there's multiple stories. And I personally, as much as I'm on the fence. I'll probably go.
DDT, man. DDT.
I'll go. Yeah, 4 Daleks.
It's not to say that you have to think it's perfect with 4 Daleks. It's
no,
just
it's
like
not. That would be the mythical 5 Daleks that we haven't given yet.
Someday.
I think the closest we've gotten to that is probably Aztecs. But there's enough racial cringe in that one.
That's true.
Yeah, no, but I appreciate the amount of work. Even the editing process was a difficult thing. Oh, something to note, the music, the incidental music in this episode. This was the first appearance of Dudley Simpson, who will be our incidental music for 60 serials of the show.
I actually don't think it's our introduction to Dudley Simpson. It's Dudley Simpson's introduction to the show.
Yes.
But I believe he also did Spearhead from Space.
Yes, he did.
Oh.
He's got a very dramatic touch, which I appreciate.
That works on a kid's show.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course, Dudley Simpson would show up now. He's a Simpson. There's a Smithers. It all comes together.
There you go. Doctor Who even beat The Simpsons. Oh, I actually do have one thing. That pile of ant eggs. People really kind of like that, to the point that for at least a couple of years afterward, they had parties featuring iced ant eggs and optional ant legs.
What?
At like Doctor Who themed parties, they made like pastries and things that were shaped like those ant eggs.
Well, that makes sense, I guess. People had Doctor Who parties?
Yes.
When?
Sure.
When did that start?
The earliest one I know of is 1964.
So that's the year after Doctor Who came out.
And the Doctor Who fandom was born.
Yeah. Like a Doctor Who themed Christmas party is the one I found.
That's adorable.
I'm betting that once the Doctor Who fandom was formed, they instantly began arguing about when the show had lost its way and stopped being good.
Yep, probably.
Probably from like the first episode.
Yeah, it was the caveman.
Gosh. I don't understand how the BBC hasn't marketed the show better. Like, oh my God.
Oh, they want to kill it.
They want to kill it.
But like, How about you kill it after you make a whole bunch of money from it?
We will talk more about how the BBC tried to kill it next time. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, join us on Buzzsprout or wherever you download your podcasts to download us to whatever device you want to use. Take us in the car, listen to us in the shower. We'll be your company. We're very lonely. We want people.
Don't stalk us.
But yeah, that was Planet of the Giants. Next time we are jumping back to the mid 2000s to check in with the Ninth Doctor and see if we all feel fine, because it is the end of the world. Feed your TARDIS.
Don't get exterminated.
Yep. Remember, make ant-egg cupcakes, apparently. That sounds delicious.
There's nothing like a good fire, is there?